Imagine your childhood Pokemon cartridges slowly becoming unreachable. The shops are closing, digital stores are shutting down, prices are rising for games, and fake consoles are everywhere. I'm Freakzii, and in today's video I'm here to show you how I would design a Pokemon Classics Portal that preserves the games in their retro state, gives safe transfers of Pokemon from these classic collections, and supports retro competitions and protects the Pokemon brand. Before I explain how my Pokemon Classics collection would work, I thought I'd explain the problems I'm trying to get it to solve, as I know that the Game Freak, the Pokemon company, are having many of these issues, and I thought this would be the best way to solve these issues through a Pokemon Classic Portal where they can guarantee and protect users in a way that allow them to access their old titles. So firstly, many digital storefronts that currently have sold classic Pokemon titles have been shutting down in the last few years. For example, the Nintendo eShop for the Wii U and the 3DS both shut down on the 27th of March 2023, cutting off major legal ways to go and buy the classic Pokemon titles. At the same time as this, hardware and software prices are rising for games, and this also makes it really hard to not find counterfeit products that people are trying to make a quick buck off of people looking to play the original games. For example, in Italy, there was 12,000 fake consoles loaded with over 47 million pirated games seized, which equated to around 47.5 million euros. This is just an example of where people are, having to try and buy these sort of fake consoles with these old games loaded as they really want to play them, but the classic like Game Boys and these sort of things aren't available to actually buy, or they're way too expensive. So the only alternative they have is to buy one of these cheaper consoles that obviously they all look legit and stuff, but they might also have other issues with it. Now I've kind of given an overview of all the problems I believe the Pokemon companies are currently be facing with not having any sort of way to host their classic Pokemon games. I really do believe with the Pokemon's 30th anniversary coming up next year in 2026, that a Pokemon's Classic Collection would be the perfect way to encapsulate all of their titles and be able to keep them all updated and modular in one sort of very, not small, but a compacted application that allows players to access all of the old generations and games in a safe and easy way to be able to access all their old Pokemon and these sort of things. So now I've explained that, I would love to talk about firstly how I would monetize and distribute this application game cartridge. The first option that I have is a offline sort of buy all in bulk option. So this would be a one-time either physical or Nintendo eShop purchase, but this would be the main way to kind of put this sort of thing on a game cartridge, as I know the majority, well, all of the Pokemon games now are pretty much still on game cartridges, and that's something I would like to keep around. So it's the reason that I'm explaining it in sort of the ways I'd like to distribute and monetize the game. So definitely the first option would be to kind of have these physical cartridges that, or to buy through an eShop, and it would be obviously you'd buy all of the games, all of the retro generations, maybe up into just before Sword and Shield, and you would be able to access all of these games in this portal. And you'd kind of, because you'd buy a bulk and you'd buy all of these games at once, maybe you'd be able to get some sort of better deal per game, the cost per game, because you bought them all and you committed to buying all of them rather than having to buy them modularly. This brings me on to the second way we might look to distribute or model how we would sell this Pokemon games, is by downloading some sort of free hub, sort of like Pokemon Home, but instead of paying some sort of subscription for it, it would be a free hub where you would then go in and you would buy packs for the different generations you might like to release. So for example, you could have the free, you could have just Generation 4 or just Generation 3, and maybe buy just the games for that. And then if you wanted to buy the generations after, this would obviously keep it more modular and allow people to kind of spend less money on games. But obviously maybe this would mean the price of games would be a little bit more than if you'd buy them all together, as you wouldn't get that bulk purchase discount for buying them all. Definitely. And then I think there could also be a subscription model similar to how they do with the current Game Boys and things on the Switch, where you can access online games in the online games portal. I think this would be good. You could maybe pay for a Pokemon's Classic subscription, or maybe it could be involved in some sort of combined subscription with Pokemon Home you can pay each year, where you'd be able to just go and access all of the Pokemon titles and all the classic collections you want, and then kind of when the subscriptions end, your Pokemon will be safely kept in saved data, but obviously you can't access them until you pay again. So, out of all the models of distributing the game, the one I personally would like the most, I think definitely is the kind of offline buy all at once option, where you kind of buy all the games, you own all the games, you can play them where you want, when you want. I think that would be the greatest option for me. I think, especially as kind of if you was to buy all the games in bulk, then hopefully you'd be able to get a decent price per game and kind of buy this great classics collection that you would last you a very long time and allow you to really enjoy the 30th anniversary year of the Pokemon Company. So the next feature I would like to talk about is retro battling and how we could access online features within the retro Pokemon Classic Portal. I think there are two ways that you could possibly do this. Firstly, by integrating and building Wi-Fi features into each individual generation game and allowing you to access in as similar way as possible that you would online settings to in the original games to allow you to access and battle people within the games and make it feel like it's a genuine online experience like you did back in the day when you used to find games and people online, whereas you can't really do that with these generations and games now. And then the second way that you might also do this at Retro Battle Hub is through sort of a mini Pokemon Champions like hub, another thing that's supposed to be releasing next year, where maybe you can get all of the Pokemon like sort in Pokemon Home. You can access Pokemon from your Pokemon Diamond game, maybe for example, and then you can select the Pokemon from that game you want to enter the battle with, and you can battle that way. And maybe this is an easy way to control EVs, IVs, and these sort of things rather than having to balance and do things within each individual game to do this sort of IV EV training sort of stuff. But I definitely think having some sort of classic modes, classic way to battle in this game is really important for one, longevity, and two, to get people who maybe never got to experience these classic Pokemon battles a way to really see how they shined and how we all fell in love with it when we were younger. To add to that point even more, I definitely think as well it would be really great for this to be able to do like vintage video game retro tournaments for Pokemon games as well. We know when there are these VGC tournaments, there could also be vintage sections as well. Maybe these tournaments would only be for fun, but it'd be a really great way to also have nostalgia at these tournaments and bring this Pokemon Classics collection into it. As you know, you would have so many generations and rule sets and moves that you could have lots of different fun ways. Every time you go to a tournament, there would be lots of different ways to battle and play rather than just the newest main titles as well. This brings me on next to, I think there's definitely room in these for obviously you'd be able to play in the correct classic ways as mentioned before, but also be able to go into a challenge mode. So maybe you could have official Nuzlocke style challenges, that are officially supported, where you can do it through the game and maybe sort of randomize the Nuzlocks and these sort of things. You wouldn't be able to keep the Pokemon, but let's say if you actually finish that Pokemon Nuzlocke challenge, maybe they are able to have some sort of, you can get different medals in the game. Maybe they can get a medal for finishing some sort of Nuzlocke. That would be pretty cool. This would also allow for more legitimate leaderboards, as I know at the moment a lot of people in the speedrunner community find it hard to kind of legitimize runs and these sort of things because people's emulators could have slightly different versions of the game, or they could have some sort of speed up glitches or things like that that they're not aware of. So being able to do significant leaderboards and maybe even leaderboards for retro battle hubs, and that would be a really great way to track who's the best in a legitimate and better environment. And I definitely think as well it would be really great in these sort of apps to use them as some sort of museum or preservation place where maybe we could have people putting it like developer notes or art books or these sort of things, any sort of unaccessed content that maybe they never got to show us that they would like to sort of release, concept art, these sort of things. I think it would be really interesting and a really great way to, especially it being Pokemon's 30th anniversary, to allow for this sort of time capsule of all of the games from the past 30 years. Definitely, as well as this, I think that kind of as I mentioned, in the way I'd personally want the game to be released is in kind of one big bulk drop. Maybe they do this and they do a slow sort of stagnated release starting with Generation 1, where they can make sure Generations run it 1 is running correct, there's no bugs, there's no issues, the retro battling is working online and everything, and you can transfer Pokemon, and when kind of that's done, they can then move on and hopefully still maintain this game as well, but move on to Generation 2 and then Generation 3, and then obviously it allows people to slowly also play through the games with the developers in a cool order and allow them to build up and also bring all the Pokemon, through again to home that they would. And finally, the extra feature that I put in and I thought would be a really cool idea is, for example, games like Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. What if you could do some sort of classic pixel art spin-off games? For example, I know that they're open world and they're trying to push open world style, but for the people who love these sort of more compact pixel art games, like me as well personally, it'd be really great to see these worlds kind of minimized down into these sort of more classic looking pixel art style games as well. And I really think that, I've seen lots of concept art from people doing lots of different pixel art modern games, and I think if Game Freak really put their mind to it, they could do some really, really great classic pixel art games for modern games as well, definitely. So, how easy do I think and how feasible would it be for Pokemon to actually create this sort of classics game portal? I definitely think that it is possible. Games like the Let's Go series connecting to Pokemon Home and Pokemon Go, allowing you to kind of transfer Pokemon between sort of completely even different devices, would make me think for me that you definitely would be able to have some sort of virtual device inside the Switch and the Switch 2 that would allow you to, simulate these games at the very least. So I definitely think it's feasible, and from a Pokemon, as the way the Pokemon company are currently going and trying to build out the brand and build multiple different games and platforms and genres that the Pokemon can be involved in, I definitely think that this Classics Portal is a really important piece in preserving the last 30 years and kind of being able to introduce new players slowly into the games and into the new generations, and being able to learn the story of all the different games and how Pokemon really became what it is in the modern day. And I definitely think that it's really important for the Pokemon company to take this sort of step to release the classic games in a sort of safe, centralized portal rather than having people, buying these illegitimate game devices that may not work or be broken, and you can't transfer the Pokemon that you actually play with and raise to more classic games, as well as people maybe buying these dodgy emulators that might not work and might have corrupt save files with viruses on and these sort of things. I definitely think that there's lots of benefits for the Pokemon company to create this sort of classic portal that should allow them, to have lots of different features and things that I might have not even been able to think of. But I definitely think it would be a really great idea, and it's something that, even if it was not in the original Terra League, it's something that I'm still really holding out for, even if not for the 30th anniversary, just at some point within Pokemon's life cycle. So, to close out the video, I really think that the idea and the game that I've pitched today solves a lot of issues for the Pokemon company, as well as done us a lot of fan service. It's something that I've wanted for years already, and I'm really hoping that we get a massive surprise with the 30th anniversary or beyond. And I really hope that, kind of, if you're someone who doesn't really think we need a classic portal, that my video has convinced you of that today and convinced you of all the ideas and good things they could do. This portal would be great to be able to allow people, for maybe even the first time, or to visit their old childhood, all the different old games in a legal and priced a well way, rather than having to buy these vintage retro games or do it in a risky emulator portal. Being able to preserve the Pokemon that you play with within these games and put them into your Pokemon home, as well as allowing people maybe to experience retro battles and experience these sort of things that maybe they didn't play in the first games for the first ever times again within one of these portals. My main question for you, the viewer, now is, if there was to have a Pokemon Classic Collection release, would you like them to release the games in order, or would you like them to release the games kind of all at once? And, if they did do this in this sort of way, what generation of games would you like to play first on the Classics Collection? I really appreciate you watching the video, and if you did get this far, I'd appreciate if you could leave a like and maybe comments with your thoughts. I'm Freakzii, and I really appreciate you watching. Thank you. Goodbye.